Hey guys, today we're going to be going over some of the patterns on page 3 of your Unit 3 workbook to see if we can discover a rule. So some of you might have already started working on this last week when we were together. So now we're just going to go ahead and go over these. And the way that these work, the further down the page you get, the more challenging they are. Okay, so I strongly encourage you to be pausing this video throughout to see if you can figure out the pattern before I walk you through the answer. Okay? All right, so looking at this first one, hopefully by now you've already had a chance to look at that to see if you can figure out the pattern. Obviously, it has something to do with letters. So if we think about our alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, L, M, N. So M would be right in between. Okay, the other one that I have both sides on, so that means I can use it as a clue, is this W and Y. So let's see if this prediction up here about just skipping a letter works for down here too. So I have W, X, Y. Okay, so it works for my other clue too. So that means that my rule has to be that it skips a letter. Okay, so my rule is skip a letter. All right, so now we're going to have to go backwards. If my output is C, that means my input needs to be 2 letters before C. So if I go backwards to B and then A, I know that my input has to be the letter A. Now I can do this again going backwards from F. So if I go backwards from F, I'm at E and then D. D, E, F. Okay, now we get to go forward. So if I have Q, R, S. All right, and then down here in these 2 blank rows, my expectation is that you guys are using the same pattern, but doing 2 more examples. Okay, so if my letter was K, I would skip a letter, so K, L, M. And if my letter were, let's say, R, okay, I would go R, S, and T would be my output. All right, at this point, if you haven't had a chance to look at what the pattern is here, please pause the video and take a look at it for yourself to see if you can figure it out before I give you the answer. All right, so I have 2 rows here where I have both my input and my output. So I can use these 2 as clues to help me figure out the pattern. So I see on this one that it's going from hot to cold. Okay, I know that those are opposites. And if I look down here, I have up and down. I know those are opposites. Okay, so obviously my rule is opposites. So if I have easy, the opposite of easy would be hard. The opposite of light could either be dark or even heavy, depending on how you're looking at it, right? If we're talking about something being light in weight, then heavy would be the opposite. If we're talking about something being light, like bright, then the opposite of that would be dark. Okay, down here, the opposite of left is right. And then let's see, opposite of tall is short. Opposite of expensive, cheap. All right, so my expectation is that you guys are creating some examples down there, okay? All right, and again, if you have not had a chance to try and figure out the pattern for C on your own, I want you to go ahead and pause the video right now to see if you can figure it out before I give you the answer. All right, so for a lot of you that came up to me asking about this one, my hint was to look at the number of sides. Okay, so a triangle obviously has 3 sides. This shape right here is a pentagon, which is 5 sides. Okay, I also have a clue right here. I see that this has 6 sides, so it's a hexagon. And this shape has 8 sides. It's an octagon. So I'm seeing that each time I'm going from my X, my input, to my output, I'm adding 2 sides. All right, so if I have a pentagon, a 5-sided shape right here, and I need to add 2 more sides, that means I'm now going to have a 7-sided shape. You don't need to actually draw that out. That's a septagon. Now let's see, I've got this one right here. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sides, so that one's an octagon. If I add 2 sides to that, that means I'm going to have a 10-sided figure or a decagon. All right, and now for this one, I'm going to have to go backwards. So if this one has 6, I need to go backwards, and the opposite of addition is subtraction. So I'm going to subtract 2 sides, which means that this is just going to be a rectangle or a square. All right, now we need to come up with some examples. And just like with the 7-sided and the 10-sided, I am not expecting you guys to actually be able to draw this stuff out. So let's say I started with a 7-sided figure. If I add 2 more sides, that means I'm going to end up with a 9-sided figure or a nonagon. All right, let's see, what else don't we have? If I start with a 10-sided figure, which is a decagon, I would end up with a 12-sided figure. And to be perfectly honest, I don't remember what that's called. We don't have to talk about 12-sided shapes very often. All right, so our rule was plus 2 sides. Okay, so now we're going to start getting into, I apologize if you guys can hear the vacuum. The custodian is vacuuming right now, but now we're going to start getting into rules that are math, right? That are about numbers. So here I have 3 different lines or rows that I can use as a clue. So I'm going to look at my 8 first to 17. So there's a couple different ways that I can get to 17. I know that 8 times 2 is 16. So potentially my rule here could be times 2 would give me to 16, and then plus 1 would get me to 17. Okay, so let's look at these other 2 clues to see if that works for those as well. Okay, so I'm saying times 2, then plus 1. All right, so let's look down here at 12. 12 times 2 is 24, plus 1 gives me 25. Okay, so I know that this rule also works for this row. But let's check our last set of clue, or our last clue right here. I have 10 over here. 10 times 2 is 20, plus 1 gives me 21. So that rule works for that row too. So that has to be my rule. So it is times 2, then plus 1. And we're going to practice writing that as an equation in a couple minutes, but not quite yet. So let's use this rule to complete some of these missing values here. So if my input is -2, I need to multiply it times 2, which gives me -4, and then add 1, which gives me -3. Okay, here I'm going from my output to my input, so I'm going to have to go backwards. So from the end of my rule, from 9, I'm going to do the opposite of adding, which is subtracting. So I'm going to subtract 1. And then instead of multiplying by 2, I'm going to divide by 2. So 9 minus 1 is 8. Divide that by 2, and I get 4. Okay, if we want to make sure that that's working, now I can just go forwards with my rule. So I have 4 times 2, which is 8, plus 1 gives me 9. So I know that we followed that correctly. Okay, now I just need to fill in 2 rows with examples. So you guys should be creating your own, not copying mine. But I'm going to do, let's see, 0. So 0 times 2 is 0, and then plus 1 gives me 1. Or maybe it's -10, and -10 times 2 is -20. -20 plus 1 gives me -19. Okay, we're going to go ahead and skip a couple. Let's see here. Let's go down to C in this second part right here. So now we're on this 3, 3. And let's look at C here, okay? So this one's got a decimal in it, and it makes that a little scary. But I also see that it doesn't matter if my number is negative or positive for my input. My output is always positive. So I'm already thinking something weird over here. And then right away, this number right here catches my eye because I know that negative 10 times negative 10 is a positive 100. Okay, if I add 1 to that, then I would get to 101. Okay, here, if I do 2 times 2, so I'm timesing this number by itself, I would get 4 plus 1 would bring me 5. So my rule here is that my input, the x, is being multiplied by itself. And to say that something is being multiplied by itself is the same as squared. So my rule is x squared and then plus 1. Okay, I can use that here to check out my other answers. So here I have 0. 0 times 0 is 0. Plus 1 gives me 1. Okay, so for all three of these examples where I have complete clues, this works. So this has to be my rule. Okay, so from here, we're going to try and go backwards. Okay, I need to go back this way. So I'm going to do the opposite, which means I'm going to subtract 1 first. So 37 minus 1 gives me 36. And then I'm trying to think what number times itself equals 36. And I know that 6 times 6 is 36. So my input number had to be 6. Okay, let's do the same thing with 50. Okay, so I know I need to go backwards here to get to my input. So I'm going to use this rule, but doing the opposite. So starting back here, instead of adding 1, I'm going to subtract 1. 50 minus 1 gives me 49. And then I need to think to myself, what number times itself is 49? I know that 7 times 7 is 49, so this number has to be 7. All right, now we've got the easy ones going from input to output. So I have 0.5. I'm going to multiply it times itself. So that's 1/2 times 1/2. If I multiply straight across, I know that this is 1/4. So 0.5 squared is 1/4. Then I'm going to add my 1, and I end up getting 1 1/4, or 1.25. All right, and then last but not least, let's fill out this row for -5 right here. So -5 times itself. So that's a negative times a negative, which means that this is going to turn positive. 5 times 5 is 25. So I have 25 plus 1, which is 26. All right, go ahead and do your best to see if you can come up with the rules for the rest of these. I will post an answer key, but hopefully we've gone through enough problems that you can kind of figure out what it is that I'm expecting you guys to do. Okay, so make sure that you're checking your answers with all of the other problems once you finish this page. Also, once you're done with this, we do have a Kahoot for you to do to practice finding patterns.